Welcome to episode 41 from the Shed End podcast with myself, T-Dark.
And as always, I'm joined by Theo and Haydar. So how are you both doing?
Very well. It's all right here in sunny Feltham, but we got our old man up there in Dubai, so, you know, it's all going good.
Holiday and lifestyle is good. Football results not so good, so it balances out really. But yeah, still out here in Dubai. It's sunny. Going to the beach every day, so I can't complain too much.
Yeah, that's not too bad, and yeah, that's good. That's good.
We've lost image, T.
Oh, you lost the image?
Yep.
So it's probably a good thing, to be fair. But yeah, no, I was just saying, yeah, it's obviously good to be out in Dubai. Obviously, much better than grey, cloudy, rainy, windy England at the moment. But yeah, let's start off. Obviously, for those who are listening on audio, you can follow us on our socials from the Shed End on Twitter and from the Shed End with underscores between each of the words on Instagram as well, and YouTube. You can also find us if you just search for From the Shed End. You should be able to find us on there as well. So like and subscribe. Let us know your thoughts as well. Obviously, we want to hear what you think about what we're going to talk about in today's episode. But let's get into it. Wednesday. Let's start on a high. Let's not depress ourselves anymore. It's Friday, but arguably, I think we saw Timo Werner's best performance in a Chelsea shirt against Zenit. Haydar, I'll come to you first. Would you agree?
I'd say it was the most clinical performance. One thing I think he hasn't lacked in from the beginning, we can all agree on, is his effort every time he plays, the runs he makes, you know, just constantly working from the front, pressing. But we've always wanted him to have that end product of, you know, taking the initiative himself, making decisions to beat defenders and just finish the ball easy. You know, the compilations we saw at Leipzig, you know, I kind of saw that against Zenit. So in terms of his best performance, I would say definitely his most clinical. And going forward, if he picks up this sort of form, it could really help us out.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. Theo, what do you think? What do you think in terms of his performance on Wednesday?
I'm on mute. Sorry,
yep,
I was on mute there. Alongside Kepa, I thought he's one of our best players on Wednesday. I thought he was clinical, like Haydar said. I think he's our player now since he's joined Chelsea with the most goals. I think 34 goal contributions, 17 goals and 17 assists since he's joined Chelsea. So the numbers are very decent for him. But I think it's just when we signed him, we just expected him to be that, 20 goal a season striker that we were, he was proving to be in the Bundesliga. But yeah, if he carries on with performances like that, then it's promising. But then you just start to wonder if he's more suited to European football than Premier League football, maybe. That's another question we have to ask.
I felt like, I don't know if you guys noticed it, but he did well in a two up front rather than, out wide on the left. I feel like when he is in and around 6-yard box, something could happen. Whereas if we're asking him to pick up the ball wide and, somehow turn into Eden Hazard where he's able to dribble through people and then give us an end product, I think that's where perhaps he's got weaknesses. So going forward, I think it's definitely to think of, him and Lukaku as a two. I think that worked quite well because even Lukaku fed off him quite well. And, I think it was in the first minute or two and they were just linking up. And yeah.
I think that as well, going back to Lukaku at Inter Milan, I've always said I think he works better when he's playing with two, second striker almost up front with him. He had Martinez at Inter Milan and it worked really well. And I think, I agree with you, I think in terms of what we got to see from him against Zenit, you get that early goal and you kind of almost think to yourself, oh, how many are we going to score tonight? That was the first thing I thought when that first goal goes in. You think, might be a bit of a cricket score. You're optimistic. And then, it was just, I think from that was probably the best moment of the game for me from a Chelsea perspective, if I'm honest. I don't think there was much more. Kepa was brilliant, as always, when he's played under Tuchel. I thought he had a really good performance. But I think the game was lost for me in midfield. And it was hard. It was hard to see because obviously the changes again that we spoke about on here, there were forced changes from Tuchel. He had to make those changes, but that's where the game's won and lost for me, in my opinion.
This is sorry to jump in there, but this is what I feel was a criticism of the modern day manager for me, that the flaws in the way they manage comes with if they don't have the exact personnel for a system. Because when they do have, the perfect 11 for a system, it's all good, like when we're all fit and we've got Jorginho in the middle, Kovacic, ball carriers, people that battle, people that, can pass between lines. Then you see that these modern day managers' system, it flourishes. But the second, and we are hit with injuries. There's no doubt about that. There's to have 3 or 4 midfielders, and even Loftus-Cheek got injured before the game started. So that is terrible luck, but it is a flaw going forward, and I think other teams will jump onto that very quickly. If we continue to have these injuries, like you said, T. We lost it in that midfield. We were, we had Barkley playing centre mid for a bit. Saul was on the left. It was very disorganised, and they took advantage of that, and they grew in the game, didn't they?
100%. Talk to me, Theo, about Kepa, because I know you play goalkeeper. What was your thoughts on him? Because, like I said, I thought he was really impressive. He pulled off. So I think they could have been 3-1 up before half time, if we're honest. But what was your thoughts on Kepa?
I thought it was fantastic, absolutely fantastic. I think it's his first game probably since around October time when he played against Southampton in the Cup. And, as a goalkeeper, when you don't get, it's a bit like not as much, but similar to an outfield player. When you don't get much game time, you're on a training pitch, you wait out one game, you want to prove yourself to the manager that you can be in this first team. And for me, he took his chance, and he probably, now Tuchel's got a dilemma, whether to play him against Leeds. And I think he does deserve a chance to play against Leeds in the Premier League. 3 standout saves for me on against Zenit, the 2 1-on-1s which he shut down really well, particularly I think the second one where he stuck his hand out and, prevented the player to kind of, get above his body. And then the save from a header was fantastic. The reflex to get quite low and to, just tip it away, not only to save it, but to push it out of trouble and out of the danger area was fantastic. And he's growing in confidence as well. I think the last season and this season, he's really grown in confidence, whether that's Tuchel.
You can see it in his body language, can't you?
Body language as well. He looks more kind of confident, coming out to catch balls. One point of criticism still from a goalkeeping perspective, just how I criticise Mendy for his distribution, which I think Kepa is better at than Mendy, but Kepa still needs to maybe do a bit better from shots from distance. That last shot, I'm not going to criticise him because it was a fantastic volley, but, you do wonder if maybe Mendy was slightly taller and, more dominant when it comes to, punching, saving these shots from distance, whether he may be saving that one. But then again, maybe Mendy's not saving the header one or the 1-on-1s. So, I think he's a fantastic goalie. And I think in the summer, we've got a big problem because you've got 2 goalkeepers that, in my opinion, are first choice, goalkeepers and should be starting every single game. So, I do want to see Kepa play a bit more football, and especially in this busy December month and when Mendy's slowly dipped in form as well. I think it's the perfect chance for him to prove himself.
Do you agree with that, Hader?
I agree to an extent in terms of I would like to see him perform more, perhaps keep him in the cup games. But I do think it's quite soon to jump on Mendy's back, especially when you look at his record. If we're going to judge him off perhaps the last 2 games, then 100%, you would look at perhaps bringing in Kepa. But I think a lot of where we are right now and what we've achieved under Tuchel is because of Mendy. And if we just go back before Mendy, it was a disaster. Every time we went on the pitch, there was a mistake. We were conceding goals for fun, and we were praying for days where we'd have a solid keeper that's is trustworthy before the sticks. Now, obviously, taking Kepa out of the team, as it's evident, it's taught him a lesson.
I do agree. I just want to say, sorry to interrupt, but arguably Kepa's never really played with Rudiger, Christensen, and Thiago Silva in a back 3 in the Tuchel system, which has looked really solid defensively. So maybe he deserves a chance to prove himself in that system where we've looked a lot. Forget the last 4 or 5 games, but before then, where we look really, really comfortable defensively. So, there's maybe a chance for him to, say, I do deserve the odd game.
He's knocking on the door.
He's knocking. I do agree. I feel more confident, watching Chelsea as a Chelsea fan with Mendy in goal. But I do think Kepa deserves a couple games maybe to prove to Mendy that, listen, there's healthy competition out there on the bench. You're not like the first choice goalkeeper guaranteed yet. You'll get your chance again. But for now, we've got Kepa who's playing some brilliant performances and who should be starting, especially when he's high in confidence after that performance in Russia. I think he deserves to start on Saturday against Leeds.
I mean, as a keeper yourself, you kind of don't need to be told things.
No.
I think Mendy's sitting there in training or on the bench, and he doesn't need anybody to tell him, your next performance or your next two performances will be vital. He
knows.
This man is waiting. He's pouncing. He's waited his chance. He's been there for months now, if not over a year. So that's healthy. That's healthy going forward. That type of competition is healthy because you could argue Mendy got comfortable. You could, there was a period where, as Chelsea fans, we're sitting there saying best keeper in the world. He should be getting all these awards and players read that. The players hear this sort of things and it perhaps it does feed on the ego a bit. So, there is an argument for perhaps him getting comfortable and this kind of being a little shake up for him. And, from the perspective of the club, I think that's a very healthy situation to be in.
I can't agree more. I think it's a good thing that we've got to, we've been crying out for goalkeepers for so long. They're like buses, and then you get two that are pretty decent. So I think it's a good thing, very much like the Chilwell and Alonso comparison, that we've got two brilliant left wing backs or left backs. I think it's brilliant that we've got two goalkeepers, and even Bentonelli, obviously he's not really going to feature that much, but to even have him as the third choice for me is it's a brilliant luxury to have as a Chelsea fan. But I wanted to talk before we move on, and it kind of links into the two, but I wanted to talk about Malang Sarr, who for me, I don't know. I'm still mixed about him in terms of, does he fit what we're trying to do at Chelsea? Is he good enough to be a centre-back at Chelsea? Obviously, the obvious thing is his height for me. I think he's not the tallest in terms of centre-backs. But I just think as well, I don't think it helped. Christensen got a lot of the criticism, in my opinion, against Zenit. And I put that down to probably the fact that he was playing with Malang Sarr. Saul was at left wing back, so it was an unnatural preferred choice for Tuchel, and obviously the three centre backs. But what did you think, Theo, in terms of Malang Sarr? What was your thoughts on his performance?
Well, I don't want to just point to a single player, because I think that was a very weakened starting 11, and the fact that he had Barkley and Reece James in midfield, decent players, but they're no Kante, they're no Jorginho. It probably doesn't help, your defenders and your goalkeeper. But I do agree, amongst the defenders we've got, Sarr does look, probably the most uncomfortable in his system, and he's not used to the system as well. He's not playing a lot of football. He's, I think I read recently that towards the end of his spell at Porto last season, he was training with the reserves. I don't know if that's because Porto were quite far in the knockout stages of the Champions League. He didn't have a future at Porto, whether it was attitude problems, whether, the manager just didn't rate him. But, I think Inter Milan, and I think even AC Milan are interested in him in January, potentially. But I think he's a brilliant player to have in the squad, to play these type of games that you don't actually need maybe the 3 points as importantly as maybe a Premier League fixture, on the following weekend. So I think to play him in the cup games, the FA Cup, early stages, and these type of Champions League group stage games, I'm perfectly fine with that. But if, you were to play him, against a Liverpool in the league where we're desperate for the 3 points or not to drop points, then I'd feel a bit more, less comfortable having him in that back three. Whether he's got a future at Chelsea, I would not be able to tell you.
What's your thoughts, Haidar? Do you think we should keep him?
Yeah, hindsight's obviously it's a wonderful thing, and once we're watching football and we're seeing our team being dominated, it's very easy to forget the situation we're in. Our manager put out that team on purpose, because we are through, and that is the reality of the situation, and history has taught us in the Champions League, finishing first or finishing second, there isn't much difference anymore. You might get lucky with a draw here, there, but if we get Lille in the draw next, we're going to sit there and say this, Tommy worked miracles. He got us second on purpose. So it's all about perspective, So in terms of exactly what Theo said, as a backup defender, I think he's needed. He's definitely needed right now. whether we can go into the market and perhaps intensify that kind of competition, I think that is needed too. Because if I'm Rudiger right now, or I'm Thiago Silva, or I'm was it Chalobah, I will be thinking, he ain't taking my spot. He's not taking, and that's not good. Because we're just talking about the keepers right now in terms of competition. So even for backup, you would like to have backups who are challenging, who are pushing, and not just comfortable with being thrown in once we've qualified for a game or in a cup game. So going forward, he looks sloppy. Let's be real. He looks very sloppy. He looks like his concentration levels. He reminds me of Rudiger in the Lampard era.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just very erratic, clumsy, not very calculated. He's not sitting there planning, the play, and that can come down to growth. That can come down to personal skills. But I think going forward, I would replace him. To answer that, I would replace it. I can't see him cementing a spot in our defense for 2, 3, 4, 5 years to come.
I wouldn't mind seeing him have a Premier League loan rather than go to Inter Milan. I wouldn't mind seeing him at a Southampton, a Leeds.
Yeah, that's a shout too.
A West Ham. West Ham, I probably don't need him right now, but it's a lower league Premier.
What do you think of him, T?
I think he's. I don't think he's a decent enough centre back to be at Chelsea. I think he's, again, arguably very similar to Saul. I think both very good players. I just don't think they're the quality that Chelsea need. And I think, especially with the contract situations that we've got at the moment, in terms of Christensen hasn't signed his deal yet. There's no news on Thiago Silva's. Rudiger looks like he's leaving. Azpilicueta still hasn't signed a new deal. There's 4 defenders there that you potentially, out of those 4, might, even if you lose one, and worst case, that's Rudiger, who is more likely out of the 4 to go. You still need a very good centre-back to replace Rudiger. And you need someone who's going to come in. There's talk about Wesley Fofana still. Not a bad shout, but is Malang Sarr that sort of player that you would, if we didn't sign one, would you then trust Malang Sarr to play week in, week out in the back three? Personally, I wouldn't. So I think
we have to look at the system as well. We need ball playing centre backs. There's no two ways about it. The way we 100%. Set up is for our centre backs to be completely comfortable on the ball, to be completely comfortable taking 1 or 2 touches and then away it goes, to be completely comfortable to play between the lines confidently. And he doesn't seem to have that. We all watched it. It doesn't seem to have that. He gets nervous. He panics. He'll tend to clear balls rather than, play through lines. And when he does pass, it seems like there was one pass to Barkley where he lost the ball, and it was like he had no right to pass that ball to Barkley, and it put him in a lot of bother. And he lost the ball, and then they countered us. And these are all things that a defender needs to calculate in our type of system.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that game on Wednesday was lost, I said, in midfield, but you got to look at the defenders. The defence on that day was another massive factor why we lost. I think Malang Sarr played, I think for the second goal, I think it's a hash clearance from Saul. We don't clear the ball. And I think everyone's in the line to try and get the offside, and then Malang Sarr's playing everyone on side. So just little things like that. I think, like you said about his concentration as well, I think that's been noted a lot of the times when he has had an opportunity to play for Chelsea. And I just think, again, if we lose a Rudiger, I'm not necessarily looking to see Malang Sarr come in and fill that void. Or if he's not able to fill the void, then what is his purpose in the club? If it's just cup competitions and the odd Premier League game, then that's great, but we need someone who's able to step up if we do lose a Rudiger, and we haven't technically got that, really. We've got the luxury of Chalobah, who's doing really well. I'd assume Thiago Silva's going to sign a deal, same with Aspi as well. But if we do lose Rudiger, that's a massive void in the way that he's been playing recently for Chelsea as well. So Malang Sarr isn't that player, and if he is just there to win a couple of trophies and play the cup games and the odd league game, then that's great. But we ideally, you want someone who, if you lose a player, you want to be able to bring someone in straight away that's already in the club, that knows the system already and is up to speed with the game that we're trying to, the formation, the tactics that we're trying to play. Malang Sarr isn't that player for me. So it's worrying that, we're getting to middle of December, and these 4 players can start talking to other clubs in a couple of weeks.
And it's the consistency as well, you know, because I think he started against, was it Brentford? He played against,
Yes,
and it wasn't the worst performance in the world.
He was decent, actually. He was decent then.
It was decent, but, you know, to make it at the level we're asking for him to make it at, you have to then show consistency in your levels, you know, and that's how managers end up trusting you. And again, I think it just seems to come down to him with the concentration levels for me.
Be an interesting one to see. Obviously, like I said, you know, a couple of weeks' time, it might be that he's playing week in, week out. If we lose, well, we won't lose the defender in the January, but you kind of see that there's things going on behind the scenes. You know, no one signed those deals yet. We were told by Tuchel a couple of weeks ago that, you know, he might have a bit of news for us. He's not sure how long it's going to take. But like I said, we're cutting into that point now where January comes and, you know, Rudiger's probably going to be the first point of call for a lot of clubs to try and entice him away from Chelsea. And then you've got to think about, you know, Thiago Silva, is he going to sign another year? I'd like him to, because I think the experience just in the dressing room alone would be beneficial to whoever comes in to potentially replace Rudiger as well. But it's going to be interesting, man. It's going to be interesting. I feel like we lost that game. It felt like we didn't even lose it. That's how.
That's the
mentality I've got. We didn't lose it, but it feels like a loss to me. Very much like the West Ham games where, you know, we did go on to lose that. But these kind of games where we should be in control and we're losing the game or drawing game, for whatever reason, you know, when we get the game to 3-2, at that opportunity, those defenders need to be, regardless of who it is in the back, whether it's whoever, Rudiger, whoever, that defense has to be spot on.
You know, it's very easy to sit there thinking, you know, the defenders are leaky and stuff like that. But when you look at the midfielders in front of them, and we do know football, you know, it's a team game. You can sit there and blame defenders all you want, but if you haven't got that protection in front of you to stop counter attacks, because as we know, our fullbacks play very high, so there's always gaps between the lines. And if your midfielders aren't reading those gaps, if they're not, you know, pressing high enough, then you know, Zenit were attacking our defenders in numbers.
No, 100%. We were playing a Zenit side, arguably had nothing to lose. They were guaranteed Europa, I think. They couldn't qualify. And we played a very weakened 11, a team that probably never played together with this full 11 and probably will never play together again. And as you said, I think the game was lost in midfield. You're starting Reece James and Barkley. Barkley for me is not centre midfielder.
He's not. You know.
And then it just also shows how much we rely on Kovacic, Jorginho, and Kante. And those three players for me are probably the most important players to this Tuchel system. And without one or two of the three, we lost. Even when Loftus-Cheek was playing there alongside Jorginho, it was decent, but it just wasn't to the level of when you have a Kante and Kovacic or a Kante and Jorginho. So for me, if when we do play whoever one of Ajax, Lille, Real Madrid, or Bayern Munich in February, I think we need to have all three of those centre midfielders fit.
Yeah, no doubt. And again, it just goes back to our manager system. You know, you can't just throw in anyone and expect them to just understand the role in a system. That pivot in Chelsea's system is the core of everything. You know, and you know, a lot of people criticize Jorginho for his recent mistakes, and individual mistakes in that position will happen. They will always
fatigue as well. A lot of fatigue in that team. Yeah, they
will always happen because you're that kind of, you know, if you lose it, it's an attack, and if you break the line, we're now attacking. So you're the core, like I said, and I think a lot of people now, hopefully, they'll realize how important he is to the system. You know, Jorginho, and it's the simple passes. It's the simple passes of not complicating things. You know, one touch away between lines, and that sets the foundation for our attackers.
He sets the tempo. He sets the tempo of the game as well.
Yeah, and obviously the intensity of Kovacic and Kante, it's unmatched. It's unmatched. Not just in our squad. I think around the world, it's unmatched.
I couldn't agree more. I don't know what happened to my camera there, so apologies. But I heard everything you said anyway, and I agree 100%. I agree with that. But we've got a big game. I think, Theo, we called it a must-win game in our last episode, and I agree. It's a must-win game. Leeds United. They've got a few players out. I think Patrick Bamford's injured. Phillips is injured as well.
Is he not back, Bamford?
No, he got injured in his previous. I think he scored and then he came off. So I think he's got like a thigh injury or some sort of
Was
strain.
it a celebration or something? He got injured in the celebration.
Possibly. I wouldn't be surprised,
to be fair, but I know Liam Cooper's I think out as well. But we're looking at
Rafinha, is he fit?
I think it's touch and go. I think it's touch and go. But we've got Timo Werner, Lukaku. My question to Haydar: would you start them as you did against Zenit?
Yeah, I would start them. I 100% would start them together as a two. I'd go with three in the middle of the park, because I think we do kind of need that insurance now of for the defense as well. But what I will say is this is, Leeds aren't in the greatest form, especially, in comparison to perhaps last season. But one thing a Bielsa team is going to give you is intensity. And we all know that, and that's going to be a big challenge for our midfield, because one thing they're going to do is they're going to look at us and they're going to say their main boys aren't in the midfield, so they can be got at, and if you sprint at these guys the way that Leeds sprint, and their workaholics and their intensity, they're going to think that there's something there for them to take. So for me, it's less about who we may put up front, but that midfield for us against Leeds is vital. And that's where, again, it might be similar to Zenit game, but that's where we're going to win or lose that game.
I think a question which Thomas Tuchel might be answering as we record right now, but just in terms of that midfield, obviously you'd expect Jorginho to potentially come back into there with probably Saul alongside him. And Theo, I know we've sort of said in the past that it's a tricky one with Saul, because when he plays, he doesn't look like he's fitting into that Chelsea system at all. Who would you have there if you had the option that Jorginho comes back in? Who would you put next to Jorginho?
Loftus-Cheek if he's fit, potentially. I don't know how serious that injury in the warm-up of the Zenit game was. I think like the Jorginho issue, he'll be answering that question now, whether he's fit or not for tomorrow. But
let's say he's not fit, and
Reece James.
Let's say who's not fit. What, Loftus-Cheek?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I'd start either. I don't mind seeing Saul again. I think he's getting more game time now. He's building momentum.
Theo, come on.
No,
come on. Really, like he's terrible. He's like, I'm not trying to jump on some sort of witch hunt or something, but I honestly think he's not up to scratch. He's just not.
Who would you start? Who would you start if
Jorginho's fit and he's the only fit centre mid? Then what you said first, I would go with. I'd either go with Reece James or I'd put Mason in there.
Mason Mount.
I'd put Mason Mount in there, because for me, he's going to give me more intensity. And again, we need to go back to the team we're playing and set up to the team we're playing, because I think it's arrogant of us to just sit there and say we're going to go and we're going to play with our personnel and they have to just, feed off us, because teams are going to learn. If you look at West Ham, it was their intensity that beat us. They didn't outplay us. They didn't play better than us. It was just from minute one. Yeah. From minute one till the end, it was just high intensity. And I think when you look at players in our team, Reece James, Mason Mount, comfortable players, and they're less likely to be intimidated. They're less likely to be bullied. And I think Saul, in the first 5 minutes, if he gets a couple of challenges, that's it. If he gets a couple of slide tackles, gets pushed off the ball, I think that's it for him. His game will be done.
The problem that I have with putting Reece James in midfield is you're shifting one area where we've got an issue, and then you're expecting Aspilicueta in an intense game, which it will be, to then have to do a lot of running. And we know that he hasn't got the legs at the moment. Well, not at the moment. He just hasn't got the legs anymore to do that that running. I agree, Sal wouldn't be the answer for me. And to bring Mason Mount back into that midfield, you're losing that creativity going forward then as well. So it's a tough one. Personally, I don't want to see Sal, because I think he's had the options in there. And I think if we put him in there, he will get bullied in that midfield. And that worries me.
Or you're Bielsa in that changing room, and you see Saul in the Chelsea lineup.
Oh, you're rubbing your hands.
You're going to grab your centre mid and you're going to be like all over him, boys. I want a firm challenge in the first 20 seconds, be in his ear, rough him up, just unsettle him. And it's, and it's a risk. It's a huge risk, because if we end up losing this game or we end up drawing this game, we're now looking at, a bit of bad form turning into, something of an issue.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. I think it's going to be difficult, because who else can you play there apart from Reece James or Mason Mount? Who do you look at?
Is Chalobah injured still?
I think he'll be injured still. I think he's actually injured.
I was reading on Twitter this morning, there's a chance that if our midfield injury crisis carries on, we might recall Billy Gilmour in January.
About to ask that. That was my next question. I think if we carry on with these injuries, in fact, forget the injuries, I think that should be an option, because we've got a long season.
We've seen, because a month or so ago we said, I know Theo was a advocate of that's the Evan, yeah. Theo was an advocate of giving Saul a chance, and fair enough, especially because we hadn't seen much of him back then. And I think now that we have seen it, I think the answers are on the wall for us in terms of January. I don't think there's going to be some sort of miracle where he turns into, one of our best players. So I'll definitely look at recalling Gilmour rather than Gallagher.
If we haven't seen anything from Saul at the moment, that sort of even a glimpse of what he might to be give him his credit on against Zenit, he did get forward, he did have a couple of shots, he did impress me a little bit for 5 or 10 minutes, but I expect that when he's playing left back. If we're putting him in midfield and he's not doing it and he hasn't done it, it worries me. And he worries me because he picks up, he does a lot of fouling as well, and that's the kind of game where if you get sent off and you got 10 men and you're playing a Leeds team that I would love to get forward.
Doesn't that tell you something though, that his supposed natural position is centre mid, and we're completely short in that position, but the manager is playing him out of position? That's a big sign for me, because he's trusting an attacking midfielder in Ross Barkley, who isn't a defensive midfielder. Let's be clear about that. Nor has he ever played there in his life. And Reece James, we're lucky that we have a player like him who is so versatile, but again, not his natural position. And you're choosing two players who don't normally play there over someone who, that's his preferred position. That shows you where the manager's mind is with him as well, and how he can't be trusted in that midfield.
So we're all in favour of getting Billy Gilmour back in January. I think that's got to happen. It's a shame for Dean Smith, because I like Dean Smith as a manager, but we got to put Chelsea first above Norwich, and they're down anyway, so who cares? And
he's a ball player.
Yeah.
He's a ball player. He might not be a lot of things, but he's a proper ball player, and I think he might even add to our team, honestly.
It wouldn't be a bad idea just to get rid of Saul and bring back Gilmour, because technically you're not losing out. You're just replacing a better quality player, a homegrown player, or say homegrown, but a Chelsea player. And we just offload Saul in compensation for that. So for me, it's a win-win. But in terms of Leeds, myself, if I had to choose between Mason Mount and Reece James to put in that position, I'd probably use Reece James, because then you've still got the creativity going forwards. Azpilicueta isn't he's not bad. He's just obviously hasn't got the legs anymore.
You can put one of the wingers at fullback, no?
I'm not a fan of that. I'm not a fan. I don't think Hudson-Odoi or Pulisic look great when they play wing back. They can fill in for the odd game, but I'd much rather have Reece James as right wing back, which for me the answer would be Mason Mount in midfield alongside Jorginho.
Just
and if worse comes to worse, for the balance, for the creativity, and if worse comes to worse, one more game of Saul. I know I'm going to have my head bitten off by the pair of you, but
if you look at the last 5 or 6 games, I think not just from a Chelsea fan perspective, but I think on Twitter you see from a lot of other fans, Reece James is now being spoken about as one of the best right backs in the world.
About time,
because he's really taking control of that position, and he's really making it his own. So again, I completely agree with you, T. You're fixing one problem, but you're shifting it away from it, and that's where a lot of our goals have come from. and they've been from him.
Precisely.
You know, yeah, for me, I would go with Mount and Jorginho if Jorginho is the only fit. If he's the only fit midfielder.
Let's hope he's fit, because if not, it might be Sal and Reece James in the middle. So we could be talking about something that doesn't even happen, and we haven't even thought about the worst case scenario. But before we wrap up, let's do predictions. Haydar, I'll come to you first.
I'm gonna go. Before it would have been a 0 because of our defense, but last few games, you know, we've unfortunately just been a bit leaky. So I'm gonna go for a comfortable 3-1. That's for me.
I think, yeah, exactly like Haidar said, we look leaky at the back now, so I think it's going to be quite a close game. I think it's going to be 2-1 Chelsea. I'll still back Chelsea, but we will concede, and if anything, I think we'll concede first, maybe.
I think it's going to be 1-0. I think it's going to be 1-0. I think it'll be.
I hate 1-0 games.
Yeah, so do I. I think it'll be a very close. And to be fair, I was going to go 1-1. I don't think if we draw, it depends on the team and it depends who's in midfield. But I think if we can just get a 1-0 early 1-0 victory and then proper defend, then I think we should be able to see that game out. And I think if we win the game, it will build on momentum for us to be able to then go forward and.
It'll be nice to see us. I know Tommy Tuchel after the Zenit game, he said something which stood out to me, and it was we lacked aggression in our attack. You know, once we conceded, it was just kind of okay, guys, let's just Or even when we went 3-2 up, it was like okay, guys, let's just kind of sit. And it's nice to see that he wanted us to go for it still. And that was the kind of core of his system, that kind of aggression going forward. Don't worry about the back, because they can't attack us if we're attacking. So it'd be nice to see a real dominant display on Saturday.
Can I add one final question? Obviously, the draw for the Champions League is on Monday. Who do you want and who do you want to avoid? Lille, Real Madrid.
I'll take anyone but Bayern. Honestly, okay. And that's not being arrogant. I think we've got Real Madrid's number. Ajax, it's Ajax, right, as well?
Yeah,
Ajax and Lille. I mean, if we're talking about being a big club and you know, having big ambitions, they should be wins. They should be comfortable wins as well over 2 legs.
Sebastian Haller, though, he's looking like the best striker in Europe right now.
Yeah. But I mean, I watched the Bayern Barca game, albeit
Barca are terrible.
A very weak Barca team, but you know that intensity of Bayern Munich. It's sometimes it gets a bit too much, and it's from all angles. You got the right wing, left wing, midfielders, strikers, defenders having pops, and I think sometimes that can, you know, so just avoid Bayern for me. By you, T.
I think. Do you know what? I think in the Champions League, it's anyone's. Especially when you get to this stage. I obviously want to avoid Bayern, but if we get them, I'm not overly worried. We tend to turn up when we need to turn up, if that makes sense. We don't just bottle games. I can't really remember the last time we bottled a game, especially in the Champions League. So yeah, anyone. Obviously, I wouldn't mind playing Ajax. Ajax would be one that I'd like to try and get out of the way. Be a good
away trip to Amsterdam.
Exactly. See you there, boys.
But if it was, obviously, like Lille is the obvious kind of easy pickings, if that's such a thing in football, but they'd be my first choice, and then obviously Bayern would be the back end. But I think even if we had Bayern, I think we'd give them a game. I think Thomas Tuchel would be up for it even more than the Chelsea players.
They're probably more scared of us than we're scared of them right now, if anything. All 4 of those teams.
Yeah, on that point though, you do have to think as well, because we're champions of Europe. Whoever we play, they're going to want to prove a point. You know, we're turning up to anyone's back garden. We're turning up as the champions of Europe, and for anyone to have, you know, a victory over us in the Champions League, they're going to be highly motivated. Whoever it is going to be extremely motivated to play us, and we have to take that into account this season.
Yeah, and one thing that does scare me slightly about Lille is them being a smaller team. If they were to play us, they'd have nothing to lose, and they probably would, you know, play like a great game of football. And they were decent in the group stages. They had arguably quite a weakened group of, I think, Wolfsburg, Sevilla, and Salzburg, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, I think all 4 of those games are tricky in their own way. I'd want to avoid Bayern and maybe, like we said, play an Ajax or Lille.
You got to remember though as well. You look at last season's running to the final, look at the teams we played then, and the other fan bases never gave us a chance. They never said, we would beat Real Madrid. We weren't going to beat Atletico Madrid as well. We weren't going to beat City in the final, and we did all of that. So I think in those games, it's just who wants it more on the day. I think we could play the lesser team and end up actually getting thrashed 6-0, but play Bayern and beat them 2-0.
That's it. And beating big teams, it breeds confidence. If for example we were to play a Bayern Munich in the next round, and we beat them, let's have it straight. Every single person will be saying we're favourites for the Champions League. And that will breed confidence itself. So, it's about having faith in the players, faith in the squad, and not fearing anyone, except West Ham.
That's how we're going to end the episode. But for those listening on audio, you can follow us on our socials, on Twitter, From the Shed End. Just search for us on there. Instagram, From the Shed End, with underscores between each of the words. We've got a competition running on there at the moment, so make sure you check that out as well. And on YouTube as well, you can follow us. Just search From the Shed End, and you should be able to find us on there. So comment, like, and subscribe. Let us know your thoughts on our episode. Do you agree with what we're saying? Should Sal Niguez get out of Cobham and go back somewhere else? Let us know your thoughts. And yeah, what about Mendy and Kepa? Because we've got a very good luxury of choices there in the goalkeeper department as well. And who should we get next in the next round of the Champions League? Last 16, is it? Last 16? Last 16. So yeah, this has been episode 41 From the Shed End podcast. Theo, Haidar, as always, thank you for joining me. It's getting a bit dark there, Theo, so better get back and chill.
I'm having to mute myself because there's the quarter prayer going on in the background as well.
Well, enjoy the rest of your holiday anyway, and I'm sure we'll catch up on Sunday. Yeah, Sunday. He's back Sunday. He can't wait to come back.
Yeah, you can see a smile on my face right now.
But yeah, thanks everyone for listening, and we'll be back next week with another episode of From the Shed End podcast.